What's up everyone, Kaze no What If is here with What If Deku was a villain. Before we start, if you like the video, like it, share with your friends, comment, and let's start the video. Disclaimer, I do not own My Hero Academia, as my name isn't Kaoruhei Horikoshi. Or is it? Nah, I don't own this. Enjoy. Izuku checked over his costume and gear, frowning. Parts of the cloak and cape had been burned away by the explosions that Kaken had been throwing out left and right. The other pieces of the costume, the EMP glove, grappling line, and the freeze ray were all being recharged. I'm going to need to make improvements. Not to mention that something's been bugging me all day. Izuku was situated in the evil lair. Most of it was occupied by the various pieces that he needed to make the numerous devices and armor work. The spoils of victory were in a secure safe, while the rest of the room was covered in assorted bits and pieces. There was a grinding lathe as well as a veritable wall of computer screens, the supervillain computer. One screen was keeping an up-to-date account of the heroes of Musudafo and their patrol routes for easier dodging/appropriate villainous encounters. Another screen was keeping track of various projects that Izuku had started. Yet another was displaying a spreadsheet of organizations that Izuku had been trying to track. And more were keeping track of the various pieces of tech that he had been using. Most of the basement was covered in various work tables with villainous plans set up, written in code. Izuku had set up a table for a future council of villainy with a few spots reserved for some of his personal idols. Most of the rest of the room was filled with pieces of tech in different stages of completion. A whole shelf was dedicated to the old comics and movies of old, the works that showed how supervillains like Izuku had to do things. Sighing in frustration, Izuku shoved the remainder of the gear aside and flopped down onto the couch. Pulling out a comic book, he idly flicked through it, trying to loosen up and just relax. As he read through a story that he had read for 100 times, something in his mind went click and he shot out of his seat, eyes sparkling. I've got it? Really, it had been obvious from the start. What was the point of a mastermind without minions of some kind? Izuku Midoriya knew that he would need more people to work with him in the future. He took another look at his costume, which was displayed on a mannequin that he had salvaged from the beach. He frowned. I think I need to update the look too. To Dr. Doom. Not me enough. His head spun, trying to think of better alternatives. Maybe a suit? No, to Lex Luthor then. Maybe a bug mask? No, that would be too skitter. He grunted in exasperation, running a hand through his fluffy green hair. I'll think of a look later. It's time to hit the beach again. Sure, it would have been nice to have a massive budget, but Izuku was working with barely anything. Most of his resources were recycled from the beach. It may seem like everything I created was just the product of some super intelligence quirk. It was not. I was inspired by those old villains, and threw myself into support and tech development. When I won first prize over 2 kids with intelligence boosting quirks, my mother and teachers decided that I needed to be checked again, and by better means than the old missing toe joint test. We went to specialist after specialist. We did blood tests, MRIs, CAT scans, quirk factor tests. All came up negative. I was truly quirkless. The intelligence quirk kids weren't happy. One of them actually tried to strangle me before being pulled off by Kaken. After that, the teachers gave them a lecture about strangling. Not because it was wrong, but because it would negatively affect their chances of being in a hero course if they did. With such lousy prospective heroes, it reinforced my desires to be the greatest supervillain of all time. So I studies hard, I worked hard. Most of my support gear took years of hard work to make. I watched those with intelligence quirks boast about how far above the human grade they were only to run into the limitations of their quirks. They didn't work hard at this stuff like I did. I was bright for a child. I put in the work, the extra hours. They did not. Toshinori Yagi sighed. The number was on his phone, practically glaring at him. He steeled himself, then tapped the call button. Mirai. All Might. The words were clipped, professional, and yet there was a lilt of happiness to it. Toshinori Yagi, All Might, sighed. I'm calling to ask about young Mirio. The one you recommended? A pause. I never thought you would see reason. Yagi grit his teeth. Yesterday I was confronted with my weakness. It still galled him, the fact that he could have stopped this villain if only he had the time. Not once, but twice. There was a villain. A different one. I was in no condition to catch him. He escaped both times. A villain escaped you. Yagi nodded. I was at my limit. I could have. If I had more time I could have stopped his attack. His name was Mastermind. Robbed a support company, then he paused. He saved somebody that I should have. Mastermind. Hold on. A tapping of keys, then, This Mastermind. The one whose cape stuck in a doorway. More tapping. Mirai's voice, serious and laser-focused. And then he saves this Bakugo, and makes a speech declaring his crimes. The HPSC is quite interested in this matter, and in the heroes it implicates. And he has become a minor symbol overnight. Toshinori Yagi nodded. I can see that. But there it was. Something that had been churning in his gut on the day. Something that had led him to not try and push his limits. The memory of a villain, panicking and flustered, giving him a handkerchief. The villain who had been stuck in a doorway, then tried to act like it hadn't happened. He cleared his throat, the blood receding for now. He was not like any other villain. In spite of his choices there was somebody who... I can't help but think that he was harmless. He robbed a support building in broad daylight. He shorted out their defenses and made off with a startling amount of support gear that is likely to go on the black market. He is not harmless. Mirai's voice, cutting like a scalpel. Toshinori frowned. It just didn't feel threatening in my gut. Now, you say that this Mirio would be a fitting successor. Another pause. How about I arrange a meeting? Let you make the final choice. All Might nodded. This whole ordeal made him feel like a teenager again. He knew that he would have to retire eventually, but having the reality of the situation shoved in his face was just humiliating. But he would meet this young Mirio with an open mind. Death Arms, Mount Lady, and Kamui Woods refused to look at each other while the small man from the Heroics Public Safety Commission glared over them. Let's get this straight, he patted a printout, a photo taken by a civilian on the scene of Mastermind reeling the boy in while the heroes were standing around. You didn't intervene in this hostage because of a threat to your life and, quote, not having the right quirk. Death Arms bit his lip. And as a result of this, a self-declared supervillain just takes center stage, saving the hostage and making a declaration like that. This man had a quirk that they knew was minor, yet all the heroes felt small and insignificant before his stare. We were resolving the situation. Death Arms managed before he was pinned in place by a stare as sharp as a stake through the heart. Let me tell you something. The HPSC representative picked up a remote and turned on the screen behind him. The montage flew by. Mastermind, at the support center. Mastermind, glaring down the heroes. Mastermind, saving the victim. This represents nothing more or less than a catastrophic failure on the part of the heroes. Professional heroes granted a license by us, standing around WTH their thumbs up their asses while a villain saves a hostage. He shook his head slightly. It doesn't look good for you. Not at all. Mount Lady shifted. The streets were too narrow. Then shrink and get a car. Or plan ahead in future. He glared at her and she shrank back. He sighed. Frankly, this is disappointing. For two such bright prospects and an experienced pro to be less than useful in an incident like this, mopping up after a villain. It does not look good. He glared at each of the heroes. Any one of them could have reduced him to a fine pulp, but they quailed before his gaze. Now then, I believe you have more important matters to attend to. Don't let me detain you. He sat behind his desk, glancing up at them. You are dismissed. The door opened, and they left with the demeanors of sullen teenagers. Mount Lady and Kamui Woods avoided looking at each other. Death Arms started to turn to give the man a piece of his mind, then whipped back and stomped out with murder on his face. A few days later, Midoriya Izuku was a bit surprised to see a couple of figures on Musudafu Beach. From the looks of things, they had a skip at the ready, maybe they were a volunteer group. Izuku knew that nobody really wanted to be here at the beach. He looked them over, assessing. One, tall and gaunt with corn yellow hair, he had seen that man before, the one coughing up blood. The other one was, a teenager? A couple of years older than Izuku, maybe a second year in high school. And he was built like a miniature All Might, with a confidence and easy smile that Izuku honestly envied. He looked like a great hero already. Izuku looked between the two people. Blonde hair, blue eyes, confidence. Izuku jogged over to them. Oh, hello. Both people whipped around to see him, the tall skinny father looking a bit out of sorts. Izuku didn't mind. He pointed to a battered television. Are you doing a beach cleaning project? The son smiled. We sure are. I was talking with, The bloody cough man looked askance, then made a short bow. Toshinori Yagi Izuku's eyes spark and he wants to slap himself. How could he have not recognized him? You're Toshinori Yagi. You're All Might's secretary. Yagi seems taken aback. You know me. Izuku scoffs. How could I not? The greatest All Might buffs know that there's a Toshinori Yagi in the Might Tower. His officially listed position is of All Might's secretary, but there's a bit more to your position. You help manage not just All Might's meetings with the police but also with the media, the fashion designers. There's a forum dedicated to Toshinori Yagi sightings. The man looked bewildered and slightly put upon. There are. Izuku nodded, eyes beaming. Then he remembered himself. Please don't shut it down. We all appreciate all the hard work you put in for All Might, even if, just looking at your appearance, it seems like he doesn't appreciate it himself. Toshinori Yagi just stood there, stunned. Izuku turned to his son. My name's Izuku Midoriya. It's an honor to see a father-son bonding activity like this. At that, both parties stiffened in shock. Then came the inevitable. No. You have it wrong, young Midoriya. Yeah. This is. We just look similar. He's not my dad. Izuku just remembered who this guy was. It was right in front of him, but he hadn't recognized the guy without what Izuku considered something memorable. You're the pants guy. Pants guy blinked. A dash. Izuku got in full throttle. I just watched you last year. In the UA Sports Festival. You were the guy who kept phasing through your pants. You had an incredible performance. Izuku just knows that this guy is going to be a superhero. It's in the smile, the confidence, the aura. All he needs is an incredible villain to oppose him. Pants guy blinks, then laughs. I can't blame you for temporarily forgetting my name like that. Well, the name's Togata Mirio. And when I'm a pro hero, the name's going to be Lemillion. Why? His expression turns hopeful, confident. Because I plan to save 1 million people in my lifetime. At least. Izuku might be wrong. Of course, he knows that the majority of heroes need a strong villain to challenge them and drive them to be plus ultra. But this guy was going to be a great hero without a nemesis. But if he needed one. That's amazing, Mirio-san. He turned to the tech on the short. So you're going to be cleaning up the speech. At a nod, Izuku glanced at his hands. So. Where's your gloves? There's a lot of sharp edges and rusty metal here. You could get tetanus. Toshinori starts a little at that. And do you have a first aid kit in case on injury? Toshinori Yagi splutters a bit. Well, his voice trails off into nothing. Izuku sighs. You have to have a plan of action, otherwise you're going to suffer when things go wrong. He smiles at the both of them. But do you mind putting the electronics in a separate area? I'm using them for a school project. By recycling this stuff I don't need to waste as much in terms of resources at school. Toshinori and Togata share a look, and Izuku thinks that they really are father and son. That false name was clearly a cover for Toshinori, before Togata turns to him with a smile like the sun. Not a problem. You'll collect it? Of course I will. A lot of people at school thought that since I was a major cape geek that I would be scrawny. That was true for a short while. But I needed supplies, and the beach had a surprising amount of stuff that needed recycling. So I dragged in a lot of stuff. Turns out that moving heavy weights was a good way to build muscle tone. I mean, I wasn't built like All Might, but I was a lot stronger than I looked. Still, it was pretty helpful to have Toshinori and Mirio put the mechanical stuff closer to where I needed it. It saved a bit of time in my daily routine. But while I was there at the beach that morning, I had a look at something that had been dumped there. An old dressmaker's dummy, similar to the model that I had at my evil lair. It was then that I got an idea. It was a brilliant idea, that had been repeated in the pages of comic books for years, but it would require some serious funding. The business office was small and relatively cramped. Mastermind pushed the door open, striding in with confidence, cape fluttering behind him. A press of the button caused the cape to slump to normal levels before the door closed. Thus satisfied, the supervillain sat down opposite of the only reliable and decent contact they had had for the underworld. A man by the name of Jiren, the man sat across him. Well, this was a surprise. Mastermind wasn't concerned. Well, you should have known that the diabolical supervillain Mastermind dash a crack of thunder, would come to a premier dealer in the underworld. Jiren stared for a second before chuckling. I suppose I should have. He leveled a stare across his desk at Mastermind. So, what can I do for somebody who has made a relatively explosive debut? Mastermind sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Well, the truth of the matter is that I need some minions. People who believe in the same aims that I do. He looked Jiren in the eye. You struck me as the kind of guy who could find people like that. Everybody said that you were reliable. Honest. More than most people out there. Jiren simply shrugged. If you have the money for it, I'll support damn near anything. He shrugged. Then again, most people aren't going to follow you. You're... Well, he searched for words, coming up with, eccentric. Mastermind shrugged. Mastermind cannot deny that. But could you help me find people who would work for me like that? Jiren just smiled, lighting a cigar with a flame from his revolver. I can try. What would be in it for me? Mastermind seemed to pause, before he pulled out a small satchel. Support gear. Interested, Jiren leaned over to take a look at the items. An item was shaken loose, a piece of chest armor that popped out from what looked like a small canister. Tough enough to withstand one blow from All Might at full power, or so they estimated. Jiren sucked in a breath. That's mighty impressive. He reached for it only for Mastermind to pin him with a stare. He sighed. I'll put out feelers, get you recognized. There's bound to be some people crazy enough to work for you. Mastermind just beamed, or seemed to beam. Great. And if you can't find anyone dash. Wire some money to your account of choice. What do you think I am? A corporation? I have a reputation for honesty, you know. After that exchange, Mastermind left the world of supervillains for the hellscape of middle school. Author's note. I'm trying to play this as reasonably cracky but plausible. Next time might be more action-packed, and we might get some fan-favorite characters. This feels good though. I'm inspired by the Techno Queen and others, but also trying to make it reasonably credible. I'm trying to avoid Izuku just having an I win button and making him work for his victories. Comment and like this please. Chapter 4. Disclaimer, I do not own My Hero Academia, as my name isn't Kaoruhei Horikoshi. Or is it? Nah, I don't own this. Enjoy. Bakugo Katsuki felt like he was going to explode. Aldera School was shitty, with assholes who didn't even know him showing up with dumb-ass questions like, how did you find that villain? What was it like to be rescued by that other villain? And the teachers, fuck the teachers. Always acting like he needed somebody to talk to. My door is always open, if you want to talk about it, please keep me in mind. Fawning over him like that just made him sick. Bakugo didn't want to talk to any of those fuckers. He really didn't like the feelings that remembering the experience bring up. The choking, the helplessness, he is not, and never has been helpless. He's never needed help from anybody. Needing help makes him useless. Weak. If that's what being Deku was like, he wants none of it. Doesn't want his greatness to be dismissed and thrown away just because he needed help. Really doesn't want to be treated as lesser and made of glass for some bullshit involving bad circumstances that prevent people from seeing his potential. Bakugo was ever so slightly pissed off that teachers tended to say that Deku was smart in spite of being quirkless. Bakugo would never admit it, but Deku did do consistently better in a wide variety of subjects than him. It kept him on his toes, trying to outsmart the nerd. Not that he cared about Deku or anything. And the fucking irony of the situation was, Izuku Deku didn't do that stupid fucking thing that he did all those years ago. He's not there treating him like a baby and asking him if he needs help. Oh sure, if there's some discussion he looks sympathetic, the little fucker. But otherwise he hasn't brought it up independently. That hurt for some reason. Bakugo scowled. Well, if the nerd doesn't want to fucking do that dumb thing where he reaches out and gives him a hand that is unnecessary and unwanted, then he'll leave him alone. About time that the nerd realized that Bakugo Katsuki isn't so weak as to need a hand. Even though he will never admit it to anybody, but he wouldn't mind one. Deku just kept tinkering at his desk, the damn nerd. When he looked up as Bakugo slammed down into the seat in front of him, Bakugo just knew that the damn nerd was smiling for some fucking reason. But he hasn't mentioned that fucking slime villain, so Bakugo guesses it's alright. Kaken's my best friend. No, really, he is. Even if he'll never say it, I know Kaken. I think that with a great villain, he's going to be the best. And that super villain is going to be me. I have to admit, Kaken's, well, explosive. He's rude and arrogant, and he treats others pretty badly. There's a lot of things that I dislike about him, almost hate. But at the same time, when I see him in my mind, I can't help but think of victory. Think of those times that he beat up those kids who were a couple of years older than us and then grinned like it was nothing. I see Kaken pushing himself harder and harder to get those skills that others say are a natural talent down to that level. I see him, smiling and confidently leading other kids around like it's natural. Glaring down teachers and older kids alike with no fear. I can see the slight hurt in his eyes whenever the teachers and other kids praise his quirk, his grades, everything but him. Never noticing the hard work and just saying that he's gifted. I can see him try to express how much he respects somebody else by going, "You're not just a shitty extra," and not being able to find different words for it. I want to say that I saw him on that day and that he needed help back then and I gave it, but that would give the game away of my identity. Then Kaken will kill me and then I'll be arrested. Man. Being a supervillain is almost as tough as being a superhero. Koroscaf was an ideal spot for Midoriya Izuku to get a little bit of extra money from a summer job. It's also, conveniently, near the building that he was scoping out for his next villainous act. It is a high-class cafe, with a strict dress policy for its servers. It's this dress policy that made Mastermind realize something that would give him the necessary look. The source of inspiration was at hand. This is it. This is what I was looking for without even realizing it. He checked himself in the locker room mirror. Black slacks leading down to a pair of well-shown black loafers. A white shirt with a black tie, with a black sleeveless vest over it, neatly buttoned up. Looking at himself in the mirror, Izuku felt like he did when he built his first piece of support equipment. He checked the pockets, spinning a little. For some reason this just feels right. Like this was meant to be. Midoriya Izuku was shaken out of his reverie by the manager coming in. "Alright, kid. Let's go." He looked at Izuku's throat. "How the hell did you do that with your tie?" The tie was short, fat, and stubby, which seemed impossible considering that the tie had been a skinny one. Izuku winced. Sorry. It's just how my dad always did up his tie. And he showed me how to do it." His manager sighed. "How you can fool around with the coffee machine like you were born to improve it but can't tie your tie properly is beyond me." He gestures. "I'll help you do it this once. I hate to say it, but you might need a clip-on. But only because I can't see how you'd mess a clip-on up." Izuku nodded, blushing. His tie wasn't that bad. Right? After his tie had been fixed up, Izuku worked hard for the rest of the day. Idly he noticed what looked like a father and daughter pair also checking out the bank. The older man asked for some pretty expensive tea while his daughter asked for a straight black coffee. "Okay. We'll be right back." The father and daughter nodded, the man thanking him and wishing him well. Something about the man seemed familiar, But Izuku couldn't place it. Well, it was sure to come back to him. It had been a long day after school and his summer job. Deep in the evil lair, Izuku Midoriya checked over his latest project. Yes, he breathed. It had taken a while to assemble the components, but it was all ready. The mannequin had given him an idea. Sure, he knew that he'd need other people to pull off bigger jobs, but what if he had some extra help? More specifically, if he had a fake body, rigged to do his evil bidding. Like Dr. Doom, a devilish body double so that he could never be caught. As a last resort, he could destroy it, leaving no trace back to him. After hours of work, he had completed one of his most demanding projects so far. It stood in front of him, waiting to be powered on. A mannequin's body housing a variety of electronics, outfitted in a copy of his newest villain look. Underneath the costume, there were powerful industrial-strength servos designed to mimic human movement as much as possible. In Izuku's hands was the remote control for the unit along with a microphone for speaking through it. What? Izuku had to go to school, got most of his components from the beach or his underfunded public school, and had a budget that was nanofiber thin even with his stash of looted support gear. Developing an AI that not only could pass a Turing test but could Turing test itself was just not feasible. So a remote-controlled body would have to do. Yes, he gripped his thunder machine. Yes. Thunder rolled once more. It's finally ready. The diabolical electronic kick-ass unit is ready. MWA ha 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 ha. He pressed the power button, confidently. The robot in front of him shuddered to life, lights flicking on. And then the arms shot off, one leg collapsed, dumping the whole body on the ground, and the other leg flailed around in ways no human leg should. Then it caught fire. Izuku sighed, grabbing the fire extinguisher. Well, that's beta 1 of the DEKU. Really wanted it to work, but I've just found how not to build an android replica of myself. Obvious faults in the limbs and power cell as well as general structure. Spraying it down, he turned around. But my newest outfit and gadgets, on the other hand. He pressed the thunder machine just for dramatic effect. The heroes won't know what's coming. MWA ha ha ha. MWA ha ha ha. The door above banged, and Izuku's secret security camera picked up his mother at the basement door. Izuku. It's time for dinner. Izuku's head whipped around. Okay. Thanks, Mom. What are we having? His mother just smiled. We're having curry rice. Izuku sniffed. Smells great, Mom. He bounded up the stairs, turning off the lights. As he went up, various shutters and organizational bits and pieces folded up and came down, protecting vulnerable pieces of tech and plans from his mother's eyes. Supervillainy would have to wait until tomorrow. My mom? She's the best as well. When I didn't have my quirk, and I asked her that question of if I could be a hero, she broke down. It wasn't the answer to the question that I wanted then. But after self-reflection and changing my goal, I started on improving my science and technology knowledge. After all, I wanted to be a supervillain. Or support hero, as I told my mom. Even back then I knew that people didn't just admit that they wanted to be supervillains. That's just silly. Mom was a bit worried at first, seeing me just go for tech and science like I had. She thought that there was something wrong with me. That I was denying something about myself. Mom wasn't sure what to do with my tech interest. She did some looking up of stuff. She bought me some junior science kits, helped get me involved with some clubs. She got me a little lab coat and watched me do experiments and asked me questions about what I was doing. Some small exasperation and worry soon turned to wonder, and then pride. When I nearly got choked out by one of those intelligence quirk kids, she'd taught them and their parents a real lesson. I didn't hear what she said, but apparently the other kid and her parents had to sleep with the lights on after that. Then they moved to a nearby prefecture. I really didn't want to have to deal with them, and my mom didn't want me talking about them, so we moved on. Sure, we've had times where we've driven each other mad. But ultimately we love each other. My mom's just so happy that I'm doing what I love. She signed up with Bakugo's mom for this gym place and has a ton of friends there. Sure, she still worries about my dad, and I know that she worries about me and all of the explosions and fire in the basement. But she's so proud of what I've done with myself, and knowing all of this. It's just, I love my mom so much. The only person who comes close to how much I love my mom is All Might. And if anybody did anything to my mom, I would be forced to kill everybody involved and then myself. That's just a joke. That's just a joke. Kinsara Bank was fairly reputable. It was a small, local bank that had branches in Musudafo and a couple of other prefectures. The service was decent, and they were fairly generous. But Gentle Criminal knew better. He had done his own research into the bank, and he found the bank disgusting. The bank had a rather nasty loan shark business operating. It was almost like a protection racket with how they pressured businesses under them. How very ungentlemanly. Is the camera rolling, La Brava? Yes, gentle. Danjiro smoothed down his hair. This was the moment. Confidently, Gentle burst into the bank, striding through the crowds of people to the front. Whirling around, he took a bow. Hello, gentle viewers. I hope this video finds you well. He looked out at the people who were irately glaring at him. Attention, everyone. Please, stay calm, for I am robbing this bank. There was a brief moment of calm, of everybody looking at each other as if they couldn't believe this was happening. While the teller frantically fumbled on the desk, there was a gentle buzz in Danjiro's ear. Gentle. Somebody's dash. The door was thrown open, and Gentle craned to see who it was. MWA ha ha ha. Keep calm, people, for I, the supervillain known as Mastermind, am robbing this bank. The newest villain in Musudafo strode through. Gentle could see that the villain had updated his look. Rather than just a teal-green scheme, the villain now had a dark red waistcoat, thrown over a teal shirt, oversized for the obvious body armor. Poking out of the pocket was a black watch chain, connected to something small nestled in there. A black bow tie was around his neck. The shirt sleeves were rolled up, exposing more of the armor that the man wore. The belt had been redesigned, more streamlined. Even the visor itself had been upgraded, the red plastic now connected to the dark green mouthpiece and covering the whole face. The supervillain, as he called himself, looked up at Gentle. And froze, eyes evidently locked on him. Gentle. Gentle Criminal was here. Gentle Criminal was here, and he was already doing a job. Izuku was seeing Gentle pull a bank robbing job live. Izuku could get involved with Gentle Criminal pulling a job. Stay calm, Izuku. Introduce yourself in a cool way. Izuku opened his mouth, and let out a manly shriek. Amigos, 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 you're Gentle Criminal. Now everybody around them was looking at him in a confused and scared way, not sure whether to run or keep watching. He didn't care, continuing to ramble. Oh, wow. Just wow. Izuku went forwards, already pulling out a pad of paper from his utility belt. I'm your biggest fan. Please, could you sign this? Please. Gentle Criminal stood there, blinking, with an expression similar to a stunned fish. At those words, he started, then looked at Izuku with wide eyes. "You're my biggest fan." Izuku nodded, pen in hand. "Yes. I subscribe to your channel every time it gets taken down. I have a bot that tracks for it and then auto-subscribes me." It's Izuku paused, pressing a button on the side of his visor. A small pump sluiced away the tears that were building up, pouring it into the coolant section of his gear. "This is one signature that I've always wanted, ever since I heard of you." He took a deep bow, pad and pen presented with both hands firmly gripping the corners. Gentle Criminal took the pad, stared at it. Then, he got back the familiar look in his eyes, the look of a gentleman rogue. With a flourish, Izuku now had Gentle Criminal's signature. And it was made out to Mastermind. It said, "To my biggest fan." Now all Izuku had to do was get All Might's signature and he would have two great family heirlooms. Gentle Criminal coughed. "It's always a pleasure to have a dedicated fan." Now, where were we? Izuku blinked. "Ah, yes. That's right," he leaned over the counter. "Could you give both of us a large sum of money, please? I need it for my villainous schemes." He placed a large bag with the yen symbol prominently picked out in green ink. Gentle Criminal nodded, passing over his own briefcase. "Quickly now, before the heroes get here." The teller shook. You're going viral on HeroTube. Both of you." His hands shook as he started scooping money in, slowly. Halt, villains. Some heroes had arrived, 3 of them. One of them in a more mechanical suit, another in a more traditional yellow and red spandex suit, and the last in what looked like a business suit with a fedora and domino mask. The hero in the spandex pointed a finger. "Drop your weapons and surrender." Gentle turned around. "Ah, it's the heroes." He turned to Mastermind, voice lowered. "Tell me, have you wondered how I get out of these situations, Mastermind?" Izuku just nodded, eyes sparkling. Gentle Criminal gave him a wink. "It's going to be our secret." He whipped around, stance confident. "Ha! You think a mere 3 heroes will give me much trouble?" A few more heroes rounded the corner and readied themselves. Gentle Criminal stared for a bit. He tapped the earpiece he had. "La brava." Mastermind's sensors picked up a "you got it, Gentle," and then something got mumbled, before Gentle seemed to glow with power. Quickly, Mastermind focused on getting the money into his large sack and the briefcase. Gentle cracked his neck. "I hate to do things in such an ungentlemanly fashion. But it cannot be helped." And then he moved. The hero in the business suit reached out and threw a pair of handcuffs that stretched and took a life of their own, only for them to get stuck in the air in front of Gentle. "What?" The air then bounced back, sending the handcuffs right into their owner's face. Gentle winced a bit, finishing the attack by firmly jabbing his cane into the hero and knocking the wind out of him. Gentle seemed undaunted and confident in this. But most importantly, he was not alone. Smoke surrounded the pair of them, cutting off the view from the other patrons as Mastermind leapt into the fray. One of the heroes went for Mastermind, hands sparking with electricity. Mastermind ducked his thrust and slammed the briefcase into the man's chin, sending him spiraling down. The next hero to attack, a woman in a red and black costume, stretched an arm out an impossible distance, trying to punch him in the face. Narrowly dodging, he clamped his left hand on hers. Electricity sparked, causing her to scream before Mastermind closed the distance to sock her again. The man in red and yellow took in a deep breath. Flickers of flame came around his mouth. Gentle went to gesture, but Mastermind pulled out his small freeze ray. As the hero breathed fire at the pair of them, Mastermind fired a blue-white beam back. The resultant temperature clash caused a minor explosion, sending the hero stumbling back and Gentle taking the initiative. Springing off the air to deliver a blow to the gut that folded the hero like a piece of paper. The other heroes glanced between each other. A plan seemed to form for the remaining heroes, and they stood their ground, powers at the ready. Gentle and Mastermind shared their own look, then leapt back into the fray. The civilians watched with bated breath. Sure, these villains were powerful. But the heroes? They would win for sure, wouldn't they? They had to. Gentle criminal and loyal subscriber team up, Kinsara bank heist. The video itself had started with Gentle criminal explaining his motives for robbing the bank. There had been what looked like security camera footage, gathered by loyal fans like you, showing the owner of the bank, a man with a shark mutation threatening various business owners. One of them had had their head shoved into his mouth as his accountant made points about not paying your dues. Then the video cut to the events of the bank robbery and an unintentional team-up of bank robbers. The villains took a deep breath, composing themselves. And that's a wrap. On the screen, Gentle criminal and Mastermind took their bow. Behind them, the Kinsara bank had been deformed slightly, wobbling in place as if it was made of rubber. Around them, the groaning bodies of heroes, unconscious and in various positions. One of the heroes had been tied up with what looked like the hero's own handcuffs. The civilians in the hall were all unharmed, but were running away from the scene with nervous and terrified expressions on their faces. Mastermind seemed to grin, holding up both his sack of money and the briefcase. Here you go, Gentle. Always a pleasure to help out a fellow supervillain. Gentle accepted it with a warm smile on his face. And thank you, Mastermind, for your help today. Mastermind nodded, then started. He pulled something out of his pocket. I think you might find this helpful for your video, if you didn't already know about it. He then turned to the camera. Never thought I'd do this. MWA ha ha ha. Be afraid, heroes, for the brilliant Mastermind has struck again. Better luck next time. And with that last statement, the villain sprung away. Gentle criminal looked in his direction where he'd left with a fond smile before turning back to the camera. If you want to support my villainy, then I want you to click that like button in a gentlemanly or ladylike fashion, subscribe and click the bell for alerts, and don't forget to leave a comment. And I will see you dash with the police sirens coming. Gentle criminal pulled out a small black device. In the next video. Gentle criminal, away. And with that, he threw the object on the ground, covering the area in thick purple smoke. When it cleared, he was long gone and the video ended. A furry hand closed the laptop down, the other hand pouring a cup of tea. A furry snout sniffed the tea, eyes closing in pleasure. My. The figure sitting in front of the laptop took a sip of tea. A brilliant villain like that, taking such center stage. How very interesting. Principal Nedza gave a little grin. Technical skill, intelligence, imagination, decisiveness. Oh, I can't wait to pull you apart and see what makes you tick. The small grin on his face turned into something more feral. Teeth exposed and pupils shrinking. He started to giggle, then chuckle. His grip on his teacup started to get shaky and droplets of tea started to spill everywhere as his laughter intensified. It's been so long since I've had a challenge like you. A ha 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 ha. A ha ha ha. Author's note. Wio. Here's issue 4. I tried to give Bakugo some character development. I think it turned out reasonably well. A bank robbery, an updated look and the start of a beautiful friendship. Comment. That's an order. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, subscribe to my channel for more fan fictions like this, and goodbye.